just money. It's made up. Pieces of paper with pictures on it so we don't have to kill each other just to get something to eat.
Money is a strange thing. It seems like you can trade it for just about anything, but it doesn't do anything on its own. Paper, Bitcoin, and even gold didn't have much use before there was electroplating or even dentistry. But yet an entire system has been built around them, and it's lasted for centuries or even longer. But why do we all trade things that are obviously useful for things that aren't? People have come up with different explanations. A very common one is to say that we all just do it by consensus because it makes our lives more efficient. Or that it's just decided by the government. After all, the government prints paper money, and courts assign damages and lawsuits in terms of that money, where people are forced to accept dollars to make up for what they lost. This suggests that money's value is whatever the law says it is, or whatever we've all agreed on. But I always found these statements to be a little unsatisfying. After all, if it's what the government says, then where does hyperinflation come from? They can definitely print and remove fiat money, but when the value of it starts cascading downward, they haven't been able to stop it. So there must be something else there that's not up to them. Likewise, if whatever we decide is money, then why did some previous forms of money not work? Why don't we just use leaves so we can all have some? Some people addressed this in the past and pointed out that money has to have certain traits that make it tradable as money, such as being something that most people want, or like being durable, evenly divisible, so it can represent smaller value, transferable from one person to another, hard to fake, known, and scarce. And it's been said that those traits make something useful as money and thus valuable. But others have pointed out that that sounds a bit like circular logic, saying money is valuable because it can be used as money. People then proposed that money had to first have some practical use before it can become money, which I think is true, like that wheat can make bread. However, I don't know if this makes the complete picture, because even then there are some forms of money, like gold, which have all the necessary traits to be traded as money, such as durability, even divisibility, and so on, but which didn't have any practical use. We use gold for electroplating or dentistry and other things now, like we said, but it's been valuable since long before then. People say that gold was pretty, and it was, but so were crystals or flowers and pyrite, and none of them ended up as money. And even more so, we now have digital money, like Bitcoin, that has very high value, but no physical appearance at all, and no apparent practical use. So it seems like there might be something missing in all this. We know money has to have certain traits to be money, and be useful on its own besides its ability to be traded, which can allow us to see why we want money and where it came from. But the picture can't be complete unless all of these forms of money have some form of use, including the ones that don't seem to have one. And I think there's a way to handle that. And what might make it interesting is that it involves some of the things we've talked about here on the channel, particularly in our series on propaganda, about how people's reputations work on our minds. To see how this might work, let's go back 1,000,000 years, to the time of our far ancestors. They would gather tools and other things, and in some cases they would keep things that were unfamiliar or rare, because they might be useful and we might not find another one. Something that we still do today, with the knick-knack drawers in our houses, and even in games like Minecraft. Now, some of those objects our ancestors collected were more unfamiliar than others. This is often because the thing was found outside of the group's known area. This meant that the person who had that thing was more likely to be capable than an average person, because they had the physical ability, mental awareness, courage, or something else to go to places that were unfamiliar to their group and thus dangerous. And even if they found the object in their own territory, that often meant they were more capable or clever than the person who had it. This meant that people who had rare objects, because of this capability, tended to survive slightly more often than those that didn't. And in addition, those rare objects would sometimes actually prove to be more useful, which also would help those people survive. So, over time, we as humans evolved a desire to have and keep those rare objects. But that's not all. The people with those rare items also had friends and mates, and because those friends and mates were associated with someone who was more likely to be capable, and who had things that sometimes were more useful, those friends and mates also survived slightly more often than those that didn't. So we not only developed a desire to have those rare objects ourselves, we also developed a desire to be with people who we knew had those things. And we developed the desire to display those things because they attracted other people to be with us. And we still do this today. Alright, now, People could also give those rare items to other people, where they could be potentially useful to that person, or show that that person was partnered with someone capable, so they themselves could get more friends and mates too.
To receive an eagle feather as a gift, you have to do a brave or respectful act. In other words, eagle feathers have to be earned.
I think it's pretty clear to see that we could give these types of items not just as a sign of friendship, but as a thank you for someone doing something that helps us. So from there, some of those items ended up getting regularly traded around. And now, some of those rare and scarce items happen to also be durable, meaning that we could display them or keep them for a long time, transferable, easy to carry around or give from one person to another, hard to fake, making them more reliable to have, or divisible into smaller parts, so that you could give someone a smaller amount of it that can easily represent a smaller amount of value. Those things pretty obviously were more desired and ended up getting traded around more often, based on how many of those other traits they had. And a few of them had basically all of those traits, like gold and silver, making them become what we know as money. And now there's a couple things about this that I think are pretty important. For one, I think it shows that the value of money, even money that doesn't seem to have any practical purpose, is very real, even before we use it to trade. The capability that someone has to acquire those rare and unfamiliar items is real. The usefulness they sometimes turn out to have is real. And the tendency of people with those things and their partners to survive more often is real. So the desire we have to display and get those items, while not physical, is still very solid. And also that means that our opinion of these types of money isn't really important to their existence. We don't actually need to agree on gold or silver or other forms of money that emerge this way for them to be worth something. Since the value they offer is real, over time, and based off of things that just naturally occur anyway, from people touching things and living in different groups, will eventually evolve those urges regardless. And the money with the right traits will end up having that desire and getting traded around and fall into that role naturally. On top of that, I think knowing this can help protect us in some ways. After all, if we don't know what the actual value of money is, someone might come along and say that something else, which actually doesn't have the right traits, is just as good to use as money, and take the actual money we have, where they'll have something that stays valuable and we won't. And of course, if it's possible to understand the world better, I think it's always a good thing to try. Thanks for your time. I wrote a paper on this topic too, with links in the description, and I'll talk to you soon.